Oh, kia ora. Ina rauranga tira mā, ina waka, ina mana, ina karangarangatanga maha, ina hapuputu noa tēnā koutou. So I'm leading off and kicking off because Miri Peka said she'd probably have to clean up after me. But so I could get a few waivers out there before I commence. If I say anything that challenges anyone here, it's not meant to be a conscious insult. Okay, this is what Donald Trump should have said. So I'm just trying to set you up because I do intend to say a few things that are challenging, but they're evidence-based challenges. They're not driven by emotion anymore, where we make allegations and sorts of things about us. And so I just wanted to quickly make the case for change in terms of a policy that we have seized on and has been driven for our people, to our people, by our people, out of each region up and down this country. And it's called Whanau. In previous terms, where I've tried to execute this type of a process before, we've been turned back at every turn, and predominantly by tier 1, 2 and 3 bureaucrats in the big silos in Wellington. And that goes all the way back to Uncle John Rangiho and our Mātua Whāngai programs. It carried on with Uncle Karapuki Tapu and Kōkiri and Tūtangata. It carried on under Wira Gardner's leadership, Maxis and Mana. It's carried on under Clark and Co. when Closing the Gaps was thrown out. And so I was in the house with Tari those days, and Closing the Gaps was merely a proxy for Whanau. But with the advent of the Māori Party, we were allowed to call it what we wanted to call it for the first time in the country. So we've been on a long journey, because I wanted to posit the question, why is it that since the Second World War, difficulties in Indigenous populations, not just in New Zealand, where our brothers and sisters suffer just a terrible abomination in Australia, and the Afro-American communities and Hispanics and so on, why is it that our difficulties have been so embedded and so intractable, notwithstanding all of the King's horses, all the King's men, and all the resources that have gone into it? And so I just wanted to posit probably a couple of answers to that, and in no order of sequence or priority or exclusivity. What I'd suggest to you is that you can't develop policy out of a systemic that is born out of an empire that no longer exists. You cannot design policy and roll it out operationally in communities when it's out of a systemic that is driven by a value system, which is predominantly middle class and non-connected to lower class folk. And people don't like the class talk in this country, but in the last 30 years, the inequities that have grown, where 10% of our population control over 45% of our wealth, and that has only occurred in the last 30 years, we have to wake up and smell the roses. Difficulty with New Zealand, of course, is if you ask all New Zealanders, are you middle class or lower class? We're all middle class, right? Lies. Fools, they say. Anyway, so there's been a major shift, but the problem we have in the Māori world is, regretfully, you have a race of people embedded and entrapped in a class. And so a lot of our difficulties are socio-economic as opposed to race-based, but there's a collision here often. And we've got to stop the confusion on what that confusion might well be, and look for solutions. So if I could just then start to give you a couple of clangers, and I'll try and distance anyone in the room from being the perpetrator of the crime. I acknowledge some of you will be in denial after this, but what I want to say is, if I could just give you a few clangers, just pretend we're talking about a country called Blogsville, all right? And then just pretend in education we want a major debate about how we've got to shift the systemic that so well dealt and gave up and into the running of the British Empire, and we've got classes and schools that are clearly out of that DNA. And what do we need to do, because we're stuck in an industrial revolution framework, and how do we transition it to the digital world and in the new century? And so we then have a debate about that, but the debate is had by those with skin in the game. The debate is championed by people wanting to go on strike over their skin in the game. That's the teachers. And then you've got politicians on the other side trying to drag the debate across the other side. It doesn't matter if it's Labour, National, whatever. Let's forget that. But here's the problem. Where are the communities, where are the parents, and where are the children in that discussion? Because education is not about teachers and it's not about politicians. It's got to be about our kids. And so just in using that as an example of how poorly we design policy for our children, and then because of the power of a strong union to strike, because it's not about just education on campuses. The leverage teachers have is over the caregiving properties they give, where we've documented our world and our whole business cycle in life a lot around the way in which we drop our babies off to school, pick them up, or kuangere or kura, whatever. So the lag in Auckland is around $1.8 billion cost, because we start all our schooling at 8:30 a.m. Is that the right thing to do in terms of congestion costs and lag costs? So just from an economic perspective, it's a pretty dumb model. The amount of land that is taken up solely because we've got to have the old King's College Eton type systemic, the amount of housing land that's gone there, etc., solely because this is the way we used to do it for the last 150 years or 200 years. So that's just on the education front. I don't much mind if you have to be related to a teacher in this country, or or we've got something wrong because we're a very small society. If I look at the Justice Department, and just pretend I'm using Blogsville again, and we've got an analogy, and the analogy is fishing. My fishermen and my fishing fleet are my policemen, and they're out there on their cruises, and they catch the crooks, right? So they've netted them. They then deliver that to the marketing, okay, and distribution network. Okay, that's called the court system. Okay, and then the court system determine where each one of those species should be marketed to, and that's called corrections system. And so when you go through that sort of a process and you start to look at it, you start to wonder, well, I used to think poor Pākehā kids in my hood got the same treatment as me, but we now know that you are 4 times more likely to be multiply charged solely if you're a Māori. You're 7 times more likely to be incarcerated solely because you're a Māori. So when you start to run into that, are our kids bad little mongrels? I get that. But do they deserve to be charged more times multiply than others that they will commit and agree to without any proper counsel? And then all of a sudden they just go on a criminal justice track, and we've got a problem. Now, why is that wrong? That is wrong because something is radically working wrong against us in that particular fishing factory and network, if I could sort of push it around to that. And so everywhere you go, from education to justice, you then give all the money to corrections to try and drop recidivism. Now, here's the dumb thing about that. On one side of corrections business, they are paid to run a hotel, and hotels need full bed nights. Now, for the life of me, it's economics 101. If you pay dumb incentives, you'll get dumb results. Okay? So the last thing you want is a punitive corrections service running this soft contracting to breach recidivism, and we try and get pre-release profiles on predominantly our men. We can't have that conversation with corrections. They're not interested. So we've got to deal with what's coming out of that tunnel, and it isn't good. And we don't know what's coming out of the tunnel, but they do. Now we have to stop that sort of a nonsense. So I'm just trying to paint the picture that the systemic failing is so entrenched that it's become normalised by a lot of you, but that norm is just unacceptable to us, because the result of that norm, your norm, is abnormal conduct on the part of our people. Not just us, there's a lot of people caught in the socioeconomic same status. If I was to use health as an example, and God bless anyone involved in health in here, if I was to use health as an example, just pretend we're talking about Blogsville again, and just pretend that 15 years ago, after huge inquiries, etc., and lots of arm wrestling, we determined that we should run a population screening program called cervical screening. Okay, and then also, they worked out that we should do the same for breast screening. Okay, and then 15 years down the track, they work out in Blogsville, they work out that, wow, there's thousands of women not being screened who are highly vulnerable situations, and Māori presentation rates are particularly bad in this regard. So then the powers that be in the Ministry of Health from Blogsville determine that, oh, Jesus, that's right, the cervix and the breast are connected to the same species. They then determine that they'll run a contract to run screening on the one species, okay? So they then say, oh, well, this will more than likely help with the screening. Well, you know, I didn't need 15 years to work that out, and I'm a man. So I just have to, the craziness of, I could go on and on and on. We've got Pharmac sitting here, and they've got a lot of horror stories for you. But I'm just trying to use a couple of proxies that are of the moment at the moment to sort of express how broken the present system is, but nobody wants to give it up, because if you're making good money out of the present failing status quo, you will defend it. And we can't have that anymore. Because the status quo that has been held on to solely because you're being well fed out of it, but fails a long tail, just can't be accepted anymore. Which brings me to MSD. So I've had to go to health, welfare, you've got to give them all a bit of treatment. But Mātua Whanau was turned back by the Department of Social Welfare another iteration. Then you have the Ministry of Social Development, all these different names. Nothing changes in these organisations because the culture in them is bankrupt. Okay? It's a bit like Lord of the Flies, right? The kid went down. I didn't want to kick him, but everyone else did. So what happens is when you're individually away on your soiree circuits or here being talked to or at, you'll get the message. You'll get the message, or you'll want to shoot the messenger, depending on where you are in the status quo. But the point is it's pretty hard to turn back the evidence on a number of proxies that I've given you today, because, well, I look forward to question time, actually. So some things are propositions, some things are facts. Everything I've stated here today is fact. So let's go to MSD. And let's just pick Children and Young Persons Service out of Blogsville. Just pretend it's not New Zealand, right? But just pretend we've got a children's service that has failed 14 reviews over 22 years. You've got to giggle a bit at it, because the horror that has been visited on our babies out of difficult family situations, that the last resort, okay, the last vestige of hope is this agency. Well, thousands of them haven't done well out of that agency, and that's just a fact. 68% of the clients' referrals, this gives us no comfort, are Māori. When any change processes occurred with that agency, do you think they'll talk to us? Not on your Nelly, okay? So the new agency must fail. Doesn't matter how much money is going to be thrown at it. $130 million more money has been thrown at a failed culture and a failed organisation, and nothing's going to change, because the culture of the people in it cannot. And if you don't change the people, then you're going to have some problems. The last leader of the Children and Young Persons Service who failed got a promotion to run the correction service. That is a fact. Now, how does that work? In our street, out on our street, one Māori failure, you're on the front page of the Manawatu Standard. All right? But hello, others in this country can spend millions of dollars on IT products, etc., and get away with it. So I'm just making the case that if any business denied any consultation or any access with a client group that presents 68% of its customers, it would be bankrupt from the get-go, and this new vulnerable children's agency is bankrupt from the get-go. So that gives me no satisfaction to say it, but watch the space. Watch the space. So we can't, in Whanau, continue to engage, and in our region we will not engage with the Children and Young Persons Service at all. We will not provide foster care, because we will not pati over a failed agency that is going to fail again, and we get it because we're on the outside, no resources, nothing, but we get the blame. My whānaus get the blame. So we have to disengage to protect ourselves, and then there's a chasm in between. Pretty soon, that chasm, there's evidence, that's another talk for another day. So then I've just given you a bit of a colour to this and a bit of a background to this. The question is, well, what is the answer? Well, it has been expressed in terms of whānau order and the movement. So what I intend to do is just get straight into the solutions. And see, I don't think we'll be turned back. You know, the impetus in our whānau order collectives up and down the country, Tamihere is one, but what you're not aware of is they are of one. And I can't say love and unity is broken out amongst Māoridom overnight, but it is, but it is happening in the whānau order space, I'm grateful to say. And so once you've got a national movement across 15 DHBs, if you want to use that, and you've got 15 DHBs that are interpreting MOH directives around whānau order all wrongly, okay? And if DHBs want to go into a competition with our groups, well, we say bring that on. Because the beauty about what we've got is that we are accountable and we are transparent for a change. And we know where every cent is being deployed, and we know whether it's working or not working, and they don't. That's just the fact, okay? So the system. So when you're working on any policy, you have to have a whole of government approach, okay? We have that agreement as of September 2015. And that's the whānau order framework that you've been already given by one of the luckiest women in the country, last TED Talk. So the thing is, once you've got that policy and that outcomes framework and conversation in place, you then have no one can escape the policy, okay? Because it is righteous, it is just, and it works. The issue then is that you have to build roadmaps. And it's not my job anymore. It's children and young persons get off their backside and build a roadmap to our whānau order groupings. It's their job. We don't run around after 14 different agencies anymore. Okay? Those agencies under collective impact should come to the table and be accountable and transparent as we are. And if you're getting Māori money to fix Māori problems, you're going to have to come to that table and we're going to have to work together. Okay? No longer your silos are acceptable. The advocating of that falls to people like me and Meripeka, right? So Meripeka will be the nice person. So, I give you a bit of a shake-up and she's coming in with aspirin. But the issue, but that's all it is. You know, it's not pethidine. That's all you're getting. So all I'm saying to you is that once you've got that policy agreement, well then no one can run and hide. You then have to put in place the roadmaps. No one can run and hide. How do you work that? Or how do you work that out? Well, what you do is that you've got to have a whole systemic, right? And I'll talk about the systemic right now, because it doesn't. All of those services, etc., are all great. Our three unique services at the moment are Whanau Direct. In the collective impact measuring sense, that's a 4 to 8 week activity schedule that you work on. And Whanau Direct is a investment made on a matter that most matters in that person's life at that moment in time. So examples we use are solo mum, 3 kids, 5, 3, 18 months, kicked out, private house. In Auckland, they're predominantly, because we spend $2 billion supplementing investors and speculators, who then get top-ups from those beneficiaries who are in those houses. And they think that they're pretty clever speculators, but they're on the government tit as well. So the issue that we've got is $540 private landlord kicking out one of our poor darlings, right? One of our kaimahi comes along, kaiari, call them what you like, and can make a decision there and then that we're going to fix that and we're going to fix it now. If we don't, those 3 babies go to SIPS, she goes to emergency housing, the 5-year-old then goes to a new school, ending up probably with 14 different primary schools, the way this kid's going to be rolled around. So we've got to steady the ship at that particular point in time. So that's what Whanau Direct's about. And they don't have to stand in a queue and be belittled at wins. The mana of kai arahi is quite important because the relationship is, okay? We're not regulators. We don't put our people down.
In terms of Whanau order itself, just on 310,000 folk are on Whanau order related activities as we speak. That'll drive up dramatically as Hawke's Bay rolls out CCMS and then Te Whenua Heratanga and all our great providers up and down there kick in. Tui Ora over in Taranaki, and it will roll, okay? And then we'll all get nice visibility on one another, and you won't be able to blame the natives for failure. So I just thought that I'd just sort of like end it there. But here's the final thing I'll tell you. How many of you here have got kids or grandkids or you know, been around, newborns and what have you over the first 12 months? See, when we had our first one, right, you can do all the antenatal classes and read all the books, but anyway, I got our baby home and I was washing her, she was 4 days old, I was washing her and it was over too quick, so I did another 2 times. But the point is, and the point is that that's part of the point, you know, it just happens this way. Anyway, 9 months down the track, I thought this kid, I had an Einstein, but anyway, you go to the toy shop and I bought this mobile. And it had all the bells and whistles and the colours and nursery rhyme, and you wound it up and you put it on her cot. And so I said to the missus, hey, watch baby, you know. And so you clamp it on, if you've seen them, you clamp it on, and it's a wind-up, right? So the lights are dimmed, baby's fed and bathed, and she's very active, 9-month-old. And I said to the missus, hey, look, I think this baby's going to really love this, because we did. So we wound it up, right? And I saw her look up at this thing, and then she just sort of looked at the wallpaper, which is very boring stuff. So I thought, gee, what an ungrateful little beast. And so this perturbed me. So an hour later, I went into the room, and she was asleep. And I turned it around, and I turned it on, and I got under it to have a look at it, right? And I was thinking to myself, all I can see is the arse of 12 monkeys going around. Now the problem with that is that's what we see in your system. Because it depends where you are, you know. If you're at the top of your system, okay, you see all the bells and the whistles and all the nice colour. What we see is something totally different. I just want to leave that thought with you. Kia ora.
Land and sea. Talking about our home, land and sea. Talking about our home.